Good morning, honorable members.
Morning, Honorable.
I was DG together with your team. I see you are here.
Recording in progress.
We have received the apologies from the minister and the fact that the DM will be with us for a short while, and then we'll have to join another meeting. The minister is in the cabinet committee meeting, which started at 9:30. I'm putting to the meeting that we allow Honorable Modise to chair. I will come and join you as soon as I'm done with this urgent meeting. Honorable members.
Okay, agreed, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable Modise, you can chair the meeting. I will come back and join the meeting as soon as I'm done with this urgent engagement that I'm having. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Matibe. Let me greet the DM and the department, honorable members. Honorable Chairperson has already opened the meeting. I am not going to waste any time. Can DM started to present, or DG?
Chair, the DG will proceed with his presentation. Thank you very much.
Yep. No, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you to honorable members. Let me just switch on my camera here. Chair, again, good morning. If I can be given, I see I've been given hosting rights. Let me just share the presentation. But thank you very much for giving us the space, Chair, to share our thoughts as a department. These are thoughts that are very much work in progress with regard to the kind of government shareholder management model that we need as a country going forward. What we know for sure is that the current model, the hybrid model that we have, where you have some of the entities sitting in a centralized function like DPE and some are in the policy departments, is not the most optimal solution that we can come up with. The Presidential Review Committee on SOEs, what is known as the PIECHA Commission, had given some thoughts to the topic around how these how the shoulder model could evolve going forward, and some of the key issues that must be resolved in setting up the framework for governing these entities. And that's really the basis from which we are working, as now that baton has been taken over by the Presidential SOE Council, and there's now an effort that is going towards ensuring that we have an SOE bill by the end of this year. Chair, the NDP had given a good guidance with regard to the kind of SOEs that we should have in place. And it had said, as quoted on here, that we need to have a set of efficient, financially sound and well-governed SOEs to address the country's developmental objectives. And it basically was saying that this should be the goal that should be achieved by 2030. We know with recent appraisals of the performance of our SOEs, we are very far from this objective that we've set for ourselves. And we believe that having an appropriate framework will go a long way in addressing the challenges that we have, as per the question that you have posed to us. Chair, the President, in announcing the Presidential SOE Council, had put forward the issue of SOE reform at the very top of the agenda. And he had indicated that we need to have a clear set of reforms that will enable these SOEs to be able to fulfill their mandate, which is to support the growth and development and the transformation agenda of this country. And he has challenged us to say that we need to have the bill in place by the end of this financial year, and that and it should be able to be handed over to cabinet, my apologies, to Parliament in the next financial year to be processed in line with your processes, Chair. The issue of a centralized SOE model, as we will see later on, is a model that is favored, as it ensures that we have a standardized governance, financial management, and operational performance for all SOEs. And most importantly, also, it ensures that you are able to synergize your SOEs. You are able to do joint projects, direct SOEs to do joint projects. If you're under the same portfolio, you can achieve that. You're able to also have SOEs act as each other's customers, suppliers, Chair, which is very critical in a country where localization is an area that has been highlighted over and over again as important in creating the jobs that we see in this country. There's so limits. And of course, as per the objective that we started with, we need to ensure that the SOE's mandates are reevaluated, because some of these have been in place for quite some time, and the markets have changed ever since, such that they're able to respond to the developmental challenges of this country. Chair, this is really intended to just summarize the path that we are on in reforming our SOEs, and as can be seen, the SOE Council will be playing a critical role going forward in this regard. Importantly, the issue of stabilizing SOEs is top of the agenda, and this is stabilization not only in terms of their finances, but ensuring that we have the right business models in place, and those business models are ensuring that we have a sustainable business that can be able to take care of itself, and also ensuring that we have proper governance structures, as we'll show later on. Some of the interventions that have been done to ensure that these governance structures are also populated by people of capability and integrity. We have to ensure that we have a sustainable funding model for SOEs going forward. And that's what a centralized model where you have a portfolio management approach to the oversight enables you to do. And as we'll later see what other countries have done, is that we have to also treat these entities as assets and really bring forward the asset management approach to how we look after them. And obviously, they also, in doing so, there must be immediate opportunities that can be taken up to reposition some of the SOEs for the growth and development support or support to the agenda that we have spoken to earlier. In this regard, the SOE Council is very critical. It is composed both of government officials, ministers, as well as expertise sourced from the private sector, and its role is to assist government in the repositioning of these entities, such that they play the role that we have said just spoken to just now. And the issue of mandates, obviously, and their review is very much on the agenda of the PSEC in this regard, where there is opportunities for consolidation as well of SOEs, and also where there, for instance, there is some interventions that can be done to ensure proper functioning entities. Those will be channeled through this the PSEC and eventually through the shareholder ministers to ensure that these are implemented. And some of the areas, obviously, of immediate intervention that is required is on governance, on ensuring adequate liquidity for the business, and also on reviewing the turnaround strategies that are proposed by these entities to ensure that they are appropriate and they will be effective, and also monitoring, obviously, of that particular work. The corporate plans that are submitted to the shareholder ministers in the end of February every year are critical in us understanding how the resources that are at the disposal of these SOEs shall be utilized in implementing and their mandates. So we are very much relying on this council to also help us out in ensuring that there is alignment with regard to government priorities, and also to any other interventions that could have been recommended to ensure that these businesses are properly positioned, so that there is no diversion between what the plans are saying and what has been agreed by the interventions required. There is know-how beyond government on how to restructure the capital models of these entities, and that's one of the areas that we are relying quite heavily on the private sector members to help us out in this regard. I think the issue of ESCOM and the debt that it holds has been very much high on the national agenda, and that's one of the inputs that we have requested assistance on. And of course, the Department of Public Enterprise serves as the secretariat in the pursuit of this work. Some of the challenges that upfront we have already identified, and the PR Commission was quite useful in this regard, was for instance to ensure that there is a common agenda when it comes to portfolio, to management of SOE portfolios. The fragmented ownership model we have does not help in this regard. And what we have as well is we have not really honed in on what are those strategic sectors? In a way, your 80-20 approach, government with 750 odd SOEs is probably not the most. It's not prudent for them to be involved everywhere. But what are those? Which are those sectors the government needs to be represented in order to ensure that its the national objectives are attained? We've spoken about the fact that because of the fragmentation, ownership policy as well as oversight systems tend to also be fragmented, and also tend to be, you have areas of good practice, but you also have areas of bad practice across our shareholder ministries. The quality of boards and executives has also come under the spotlight in recent times. And that's an area that needs to be agreed. Now, when you have a centralized policy in this regard, it helps a great deal in terms of addressing this area of weakness. The issue of the respective roles of the shareholder, the board, and the chief executive, and the executive team has also come out quite strongly, that without a proper framework, those lines become blurred, and that becomes a fertile ground for some of the mismanagement and misgovernance that we have seen. So we need to ensure that is addressed. And of course, we are sitting with a portfolio that is underperforming. So is there an innovative way of being able to mobilize capital to show up with these businesses, and in a way also be able to justify in instances where government presence is required, but the business is unable to take care of itself, so to speak, that to be able to show that there's a bigger goal that is being pursued in being in that business. So, for instance, we got to the last point, the issues of social and economic development. To say, for instance, when it comes to the security of the country, can you really say, as much as we do not have a market big enough to sustain this business, but it's important that this business continues to exist. It's important that this business continues to be able to supply our security forces. As if it's unable to do so, it's putting the very sovereignty of this country at risk. For instance, we're able to get them to say, as a result of that assessment, there shall be so much funding that will be provided on an annual basis to support this business. And in this regard, we had a session with one of the countries that have recently reviewed their SOE policy and reaped good rewards from it. And they were saying, we are a big country with many islands. We need to connect those islands, because if people are unable to travel to the mainland from the islands, they feel removed and not feel that nationhood and social cohesion we want to build will not happen. So it puts the state at risk. So we must subsidize certain routes so that the airline reaches those islands. People are able to come to the mainland, and therefore they feel part of this country. So in the same vein, for instance, can an argument be made to say, when it comes to secondary cities or rural regions of our country, should you not ensure, for instance, that we have connections, and that could be rail, for instance, the branch lines must be operated so that the people are able to move from those far-flung areas to the centers to the economic centers of our country. And in that process, it serves more than just an economic need, but it very much has a social element to it. Chair, one of the areas that have been identified as critical is to have a unit that will assist us in restructuring and stabilizing of these entities. We have been quite successful, I must say, in being able to bring in skills from outside the public service to help us out, and really our request for some of these rare skills to the companies involved has been met quite positively. So as we seek to stabilize these entities, as we seek to reposition them, as we seek to turn around them, we'll have to bring skills that ordinarily we cannot afford to keep in the public service to help us out in this regard. And of course, as we also figure out the kind of governance structure that should be in place to manage the portfolio of SOEs, such support will be required to enable that. So the unit comes in handy in this regard. In some instances, Chair, we are finding that the SOE balance sheets as well as the national fiscal is not in a position to invest in some electrical projects that need to be undertaken. Therefore, the need to bring in strategic equity partners. So the management thereof becomes important. So this kind of unit with hybrid of skills becomes critical in managing that particular process. And to be told that there are some of our holdings that one can put forward an argument that they have done their work, that the market failure that was there in the past is no longer present, that we have a private sector that has been able to formulate optimal solutions to service that part of the market. Therefore, the state is in a position to be able to exit. In some instances, you find assets due to customer requirements or customer needs or technology obsolescence that you can deem them to be unquote surplus to requirements. So how do we exit those in an orderly manner while ensuring that, for instance, employees and the communities that are dependent on those capabilities do not suffer adverse effects? We also need to obviously, as we said earlier, the last point there is look at a new way of managing our SOEs going forward. Is an asset management company the route that we should be going? What is the right institutional arrangement for that? Is it there's many variations, as we'll show you, but is it a department? Is it an agency? Is it an asset management company? What kind of entity is required in ensuring that we are able to unlock value and while meeting our other socioeconomic requirements? Obviously, that is underpinned by the fact that we need to, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to include our people into this economy. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that we have a stable and representative middle class. There's also a lot of work that needs to be done in ensuring that we have effective economic champions across the sectors of our country, and in those sectors, in those champions that are very much aligned to the economic development imperatives that we've spoken to. So, Chair, some of the thoughts in terms of a centralized entities is that there's an entity that will ensure that it actively drives attainment of value in the business, and these are sustainable long-term returns that it will pursue on behalf of stakeholders, which primarily that would be the national government. This entity obviously is 100% owned by the state. So that in terms of its location, that's some of the discussions that we need to have. We've spoken about some of the long-term objectives of a centralized portfolio. Those are are detailed and the strategies that will be pursued in this regard. Obviously, we want to see a portfolio that has a long-term view when it comes to investment, and we have tended to be reacting to immediate needs at the moment without really developing a very strong pipeline of projects in support of the economy. And obviously, this entity will look at which are the suitable SOEs that will be brought into the fold, so to speak. We'll also look at new markets, new industries. The climate change discussions and some of the green technologies that are coming to the fore now is, for instance, an area of immense opportunity for our people. So how do we leverage the portfolio to ensure that that these new spaces are not the preserve of the historically advantaged economic sectors of our country? For instance, one of the areas that I think we need to carefully look at as well is the cannabis industry, which is a new industry, which the people that have borne the brand of its being declared illegal has been historically disadvantaged people. So when it becomes a new sector of the economy, is it not right that those that had that could not benefit from it because it was deemed to be illicit, that they be the first ones who are in the queue to ensure that they benefit? So those are some of the discussions that need to be had, and see how this portfolio could help in that regard. I'm not going to speak to each point, Chair. In terms of ensuring an appropriate strategy, ensuring the appropriate discipline as well, we can learn from the likes of Temasek, which is a Singapore state-owned asset management company, which has done very well, and I'll show you more information on that. And then what we had started doing, Chair, was also to start looking at mainly our section commercial SO, the Schedule 2 SOEs, and say if we were to bundle them together, how would that look? And the idea of complexes came up, and we'll show you how those complexes look, Chair, as we go on. Now, as we do this work, obviously the question that always comes up is, why is the state still in the business of doing business? Why is it doing this? And we're saying that the state has, as long as we have a non-transformed economy, as long as we have areas of socio-economic development which the private sector is not paying attention to, the state has the responsibility to be in this space. The state has a responsibility to ensure that our people participate fully in this in this economy, and that they have access to careers that ordinarily they would not have access to because of lack of resources. But as the state plays this role, it's important that the state is seen as credible. There is trust in the state as an owner of these public assets. It's critical that it also, it carries the necessary credibility for all cross-section of stakeholders, including some of the investors that could be based offshore. And obviously, in order to ensure that these assets are being managed properly on behalf of South Africans, there has to be appropriate parliamentary and public administration oversight processes in place to ensure accountability. On the issue of the state as a shareholder, it's important as well that there is a clear demarcation of responsibilities with the other parts of the state, where the state is a policymaker, where the state is a regulator through its various agencies, so that there is, so to speak, an arm's length relationship between these roles, and that the SOEs, as a result, are not being deemed to be handled more favorably than their private counterparts. But we have to have a strong function that oversees this work of the state as a shareholder. The importance of ensuring that we have appropriate interventions and mechanisms to monitor performance and ensure that it improves, and that there is no ambiguous goals as to what we're seeking to achieve, and we are very clear in terms of partnerships that we need to have in place, and as we said, ensure that the fiscus is less exposed going forward. In this regard, Chair, what then becomes important is what kind of strategy should be in place? What is the kind of environment that needs to be created to ensure that the performance of the SOEs, and most importantly, that they have the capacity to implement the mandates that are given to them. As we also move forward, because the bill will be preceded by a policy statement. So in that regard, these are some of the key issues that we have identified that we'll have to cover. And some of these points you have already spoken to in the preceding slides. Chair, this work that we are doing is built upon various pronouncements by both the governing party as well as government itself through the State of the Nation's address by the President, and through all this, and we're not only speaking to recent conference of the governing party, but right at the beginning as well, prior to 1994, the issue of ensuring that the SOEs are reformed to align themselves to the agenda of the new state was also covered quite extensively. And some of the points that are on here, Chair, I'm not going to repeat them. Have already been spoken to in the slides that I've just preceded. Now, the work in a way has been unfolding. What we are really seeking to do is bring all these different strands into a single, to be weaved into a single rope, so to speak. For instance, the issues around shareholder policy, some of the elements of that, we already made good progress in that regard. Though there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We have, as we have seen earlier, said that a centralized shareholder model, ownership model is what would be appropriate for the country. And I'm sure with the subsequent slides that across the world there is a migration in that particular direction. And there is already efforts that have been made in the past to set up an interministerial committees to ensure that the critical elements in this regard, and this preceded for the current administration, the previous administration, has worked on to try and get this work going, which is now, as I said, will be taken over by the PSEC going forward. Chair, we have spoken about the need for separation of the roles. Good work has been done in that regard. Standardized approach. When it comes to appointments, the PSA has been tasked with performing that particular work. and that work is also proceeding quite well. We have a PS, a private sector participation framework that is already in place. That was a joint development between ourselves and National Treasury, and that, in a way, is speaking to the kind of partnerships that we need to have in order to leverage not just the national balance sheet, but also to look at the private sector balance sheet as well to ensure investments. What is needed now is to get those projects to start flowing, and hopefully one of the areas where this will lead the way in terms of showing what is possible is what we intended to do with regard to the corridors and the ports. The disposal of non-strategic assets obviously needs to be a process that is well managed, and there's consensus across government as to those assets that are appropriate for disposal. And the area that where we need to do a lot of work on is the issue of separation of developmental information. And then what do we do once we've done that particular separation? The training and skills are massive between ourselves and DHET and through access to the National Skills Fund. There's a lot of work that has been done in this area. I guess now the work is to ensure that in a centralized policy when it comes to developmental mandates, that it makes its way there. So that's an area that requires a bit of effort. And as we define the new codes as well, we need to ensure that we have empowered boards. And then most importantly, we need to rein in as well remuneration across our SOEs, ensure it has direct relation to performance. We have seen from our own experience that some of the wage settlements that are reached in our SOEs are totally unsustainable. They squeeze out some of the investments that we expect our SOEs to undertake. Chair, these are the various tools that are speaking to oversight of our entities. And as you can see from the fragmentation, there's very much a need to ensure that we have a single overarching policy as well as legislative framework, so that we also have tailored solutions for our SOEs, and that's what this new SOA bill we are intending to achieve. We have appointment guidelines in place for CEOs as well as CFOs, and also in relation to board. But in the overarching policy, these would be incorporated and codified such that there is no. It also addresses, some of the different practices across shareholder ministries in this area. We've spoken to the issue of remuneration, appointments and remuneration. That's an area that DPSA and ourselves are working very closely together. In fact, we are now in a position where we are able to advise the boards in terms of their remuneration policies, in terms of we can be able to show them today how far they have deviated from the norm, so to speak, based on some of the market information that we have with regard to salaries, both the SOEs themselves and private sector. We have benchmarked those, so we know what the numbers should look like. That's the good position that we are in today. We have the risk and integrity framework, which also is it addresses issues of conflict of interest, for instance. It guides us in terms of ensuring that we have the right tools in place to ensure people of integrity are appointed. And that's being rolled out by the department. Now, Chair, this is an area that on many occasions comes up whenever we discuss SOEs. An understanding of what is happening in the rest of the world when it comes to SOEs. So when you come in and we speak about a centralized model when we say that if you are going to push that these SOEs are put into policy departments, that's a regressive step that will be taken relative to what is happening in the rest of the world. Now, China, through its agency, SASAC, I think is showing the way in terms of what is possible, and they learned very quickly from the Singaporeans in terms of how to manage SOEs. Theirs is not. It's an agency which is headed by a chairperson who's part of the cabinet, relative to others who will have, for instance, a corporatized entity that is responsible for the role. On the continent, with regard to Egypt, they have a hybrid model where there are several state-owned companies which are functioning in different sectors, which are state-owned. They do have a Ministry of Investments that also exercises control over about 150 SOEs, and what they refer to as non-trivial SOEs, or the smaller SOEs. Those are held also by a central function in this particular ministry, and of course this is overseen by a ministry like ourselves, DP. Then we have Finland, which has more of a decentralized model with a number of ministries that are looking after this. And then we have ownership being steered through the Prime Minister's office. We also have two state holding companies that also are tasked with the same responsibility, also reporting to the Prime Minister's office. And of course, they have an ownership steering department which works in line with the Land Minister. That's where some element of centralization is coming. France is also, through their agency participation that I did, my French has come out well, APE, as a centralized function reports to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and some of them, they're well-known companies that are state-owned. For instance, in France, for instance, partnership in the consortium, the Airbus consortium. There's some in the defense as well as in the rail space, rail and logistics, where there's state ownership that's managed through that. I think it's one of the leading entities in the world in terms of how they've been able to evolve their state ownership model. So Hungary, Slovenia, and Sweden have a state holding company, which is held through a Ministry of Infrastructure. And as you can see there, that these entities, there's a bit of some of them have a corporatized type of arrangement, while Sweden does not have. And then you go to Brazil, which has more of a dual ownership model in place. So where you have a department that performs the function, you also have the Ministry of Finance also in the mix there. So it's in a way they have a similar arrangement to what we have in this country. India has the Department of Public Enterprises, which acts as a nodal agency, and those are some of the functions that we have that they perform on behalf of government. and they don't have a central holding company like the others that you see. Argentina and Kenya, decentralized models is what they have in place. Now, relative to the rest of the world, we are just showing where we are sitting as a country. We have a fragmented model, where we have some of the entities in DP, and some of them are in other SOEs. And as you see, there are more countries on the right-hand side of this model, which shows that the tendency across the world is really to move towards a centralized arrangement. And of course, each country chooses a model that is best for itself. And it's obviously the vertical part of this graph is just showing that in some instances, you have and these being the holdings or oversight being carried through a number of ministries. Chair, we also have the other dimensions by which you can look at government shareholder management. On the vertical axis, you can have those that as social development is critical in holding on to these SOEs. They have a very strong public mandate that they're expected to perform, and then towards the bottom we have those that are profit oriented. And SASAC is an important example to cite. It's one of the discussions that we had with SASAC was when they explained why their SOEs should be big and should have a wide reach. They said they have quite a sizable rural economy, so it's important that there is an element of cross-subsidization between what I call the economic centers and the rural parts of their country. And that their portfolio of SOEs are very important in ensuring that reach. So you cannot just service the economic centers, you must also look at servicing the rural areas. So if you're a telecoms company or any of the network industries, you have to be able to ensure the same services that people in the big cities are able to receive in the rural areas. And there is on the vertical axis, there are those that have the portfolio is held for the purpose of ensuring privatization. So they really, it's about disposal of these entities. Norway, for instance, is reflected there is one of those. But then there are those that it's more about generating profits and returns for the state, being able to supplement the national budget through dividends, of course. Temas Kazan, I think that's Kazakhstan. One of the colleagues can have some of the acronyms later on. That's the active investors, the active portfolio managers approach that is being used in this regard. So we need to decide for ourselves where would we want to be in this different continuums that we have here as we think through the type of government shareholder management model that we need to have. The chair, the reality, and from sitting here in South Africa, we may not have a clear picture, so to speak, but the reality is that SOEs are important components of the international economy. What we are showing there is that, for instance, over the last decade, the share of SOE amongst the world's 2,000 largest firms has doubled to about 20% of those firms are state-owned businesses. But what you're also seeing is that the SOEs are also becoming very active beyond their own borders, with cross-border transactions also increasing over time. We are seeing as well as that they are very aggressive in raising capital and investing, and in the process shoring up really the capacity of their own states to modernize and their economic infrastructure. And some of the trends, I'm not going to speak to each one of them that you're seeing. We are also seeing that there's a mix of public and private sector ownership in these. So that's some of the trends that have been seen around the world. Some of these entities have become multinationals. Some of them are operating in this country, in our own country as well. Yeah, let me see. And some of the SOEs that of course the Chinese one are well known, but most people do not know that Volkswagen is actually partly owned by government, just one of the provincial governments that owns part of Volkswagen. So that's the reality that we have. So SOE should not can be an economic can provide the economic support and assistance that the country needs. Doesn't have to always be a negative, so to speak. And the reality of our own country as well is that this economy and ensuring the linkages that we have, ensuring that we have in electricity, ensuring that the ISCO, which is now ArcelorMittal, is to be state-owned. And that still is what build up our minds, ensure that we have red lines and so on. So there's a very critical role that these entities can play, because normally these sort of investments requires, there's a big risk involved, and it requires huge investment. So SOEs tend to be best positioned, obviously, with leveraging the public balance sheet in achieving that. We've spoken to, this is just a graphical, it just shows graphically the share of economies that SOEs are showing, whether the rates obviously are those, the Chinese entities, those have been quite massive. We see that the trend with it's rather steady with the advanced or developed economies. At some point, there was quite a bit of divestment, but there is also an upward trend there in terms of valuations as well. And of course, the emerging emerging markets are showing also a very strong contribution to the share of SOEs. And we've spoken to the debt issue. And also down here we see SOEs share by sector and their participation by sector. You can see in the financial front, how strong they are. I think in this country, outside the DFIs in the commercial space, we do not have adequate representation of SOEs, and also in various other sectors as shown there. I think this one here is industrials and energies, utilities, of course, traditionally that has been the preserved SOEs, and so on. And this just shows the number of firms per region across Europe. And so developed countries, there's quite a strong representation in the Asia Pacific, of course, and so on. The anomaly, of course, in terms of developed markets is in North America. And they use Telecom as other means to ensure that they are serving public interest. And this is just to speak to sovereign funds and what objectives they could serve, and which countries have chosen which strategies, whether it is around capital maximization, whether it's around playing a more of a stabilizing role in the economy, and economic development. So as you go forward and we are reviewing the portfolio management approach to our SOEs, these are some of the decisions that will need to be made as to how do we look at how do we regard the role of a centralized function and whatever form it would have taken in the economy. And Chair, this is just to give you a sense of some of the size of the holdings of these entities, of these sovereign wealth funds around the world. And that there's been discussions as well locally as to, should we not be looking at some of the national endowments, whether it be in the minerals space and so on, to direct towards this sort of fund. But of course, also you can put some of your portfolio of SOEs into this sort of fund as well. And you can see the Norway Government Pension Fund features quite strongly there. The Temasek is at number 7. And you have like Dubai Investment Corporation of Dubai, represented in this list with $300 billion of assets. Chair, here we're just giving an overview of Temasek, which is of Singapore. I think it's in terms of the aspirational element of what is possible with regard to once you are able to optimally set up your SOE portfolio, what you can achieve. And this is what it shows. And this they've done very well. They are very aggressive. In the recent numbers that we have, they had about $114 billion of assets, Singaporean dollars of assets under them. Their margins were quite healthy, gross profit at about 25%, the EBITDA margin at about 21%, net income at about 11%. So it just goes to show how well they have done. And these, as you can see, these are some of the programs of the Singaporean government that are supported by Temasek. They open up economic opportunities, improving technical skills in the economy, providing medical savings for the citizens, and so on and so on. So this is one of the positive things that we now have the flexibility to do once we have your fund performing as well as for instance, Temasek has done over the years. These are the complexes that we referred to earlier. So if you had to say, how will this central oversight function work? And this is just an iteration in terms of what is possible. You have that oversight authority, whether it is a department, agency, or a holding company, having direct shareholding in your various sectors, various complexes. For instance, you'd keep the DFIs out of direct shareholding, but this function, and other countries have done that, including China. The financial entities are not part of SASAC, for instance. And then, of course, we have in the Central Oversight Authority, National Treasury, and other sector ministries are represented. And of course, this function is then reports directly to the SOE Council. So this is one of the ways that are possible, and this is not a new model. This is a new model, I think, in 2016, November 2016, that it was presented to Cabinet, and it was given a thumbs up in terms of what is possible. So now, through this PSEC work, we are hoping that these will start to provide a more coherent view of what we can do. Chair, we've already spoken to some of these items here in the rest of the presentation. What is important is foremost is to optimize the portfolio, to ensure you have a standardized oversight mechanism, to ensure that you get your governance correct. And ultimately, if all this you do them right, you end up with a portfolio that performs. And all that we are seeking to do, and we'll just show you as well the Telecom example, is to try and get to a point where we have entities that are able to perform at that level. And this is the graphical representation of the separation of roles that we're speaking about, to say you have to have policy departments developing policy, you have to have regulators like NERSA perform their work with, and then of course you have to have the government as a shareholder properly structured and with the right form. So yeah, and this is the sort of arm's length relationships that we're talking to earlier. Of course, ensuring that you have a proper funding model in place, invariably at times you'll have to go into the debt market, but what you want to have a situation where your SOEs are performing appropriately such that you have a right mix of debt and equity in the business. So what are we calling for is that ensure that you have, as government, you have an appropriate funding model for both SOEs and DFIs. We're saying that there has to be an appropriate mix between debt and equity. We're saying that in undertaking some of the projects, we have to see how we bring the private sector in, but in a way where, Chair, that there is equal risk taking. We don't have a situation where the cost of these projects are borne by government, but the profits are reaped by the private sector. So we have to ensure that we have a fair model for everyone. Yeah, and that is on the right-hand side. So those are some of the considerations as we are conceiving the funding model going forward. And Chair, this is just to show what is available out there in terms of both in the private equity space, those that could be interested. We also have some of the impact investors that could be brought in to help us out, and some of the institutional investors that could also be considered. And as we consider strategic partnerships, that is some of the variation of partnerships, depending obviously on the length of time that you see this being in place. Obviously, we can have consortia that are just looking at a specific project over a limited period of time. And on the extreme end, we have we literally set up a new entity where there's coming together for a public entity and a private entity. And in some instances, you can be brave enough to maybe also look beyond our borders. So you have set up a totally new corporate entity in the process. So these are just variations on what is possible. And Chair, this is just some of the opportunities that could be looked at in line with the model you represented, whether it is we have a requirement for a supply of particular goods, so it's essential goods, whether you're looking at leasing out a particular state-owned capability, you want to concession it away, or you want to look at privatization. So that's what is possible. What are the typical sectors that this could be applied? So this is something put together to just give guidance on what the possibilities are. We have spoken to this, Chair. I'm not going to speak more to it. This is the Telecom case study that we've just put in for your own information. In terms of, I think this is normally cited as well, a great example of what is possible for a state-owned entity's transformation from being a burden on the state to being a positive contributor to the state. As you can see, there's been able, through its various businesses, been able to build up a very healthy portfolio. This is, for instance, we took quite a lot of lessons from what was achieved here when we were looking at, for instance, and what is possible. This is just additional information on Telecom today. This, I think in the last figures we have, it's at a market cap of about 12 billion rands. Government shareholding, I think through its various entities, is sitting at about 42%. That's what it says there. So, yeah. Chair, this is our last slide. Definitely what we are looking at, Chair, is to learn as much as possible from those in other parts of the world who have walked this path. We have had sessions with some of them to show us what they've been able to achieve. I think one of the takeaways from our side was that when they are able to tell you that in terms of our national budget, so much percentage of it is from dividends received from state-owned companies. So if you are able as a country one day to be able to say so much of our revenues are coming from our SOEs because they are doing well, that would be a big plus. And the Malaysians who have recently embarked on this route are able to say 5% of our revenues come from early government companies. The Vietnamese were also able to give us, if I recall well, somewhere between 30 and 40% of the national revenues are derived from SOEs. So we have to be able to get to that level if you are able to ensure that the portfolio is restructured, is optimized, it has the right leadership in place. There's a proper framework for oversight management in place. There's synergies between ourselves and other parts of government in terms of overseeing these entities. And Chair, that's ultimately brings us to the end of the presentation. My apology, it's just taken a bit long, but we thought we should really take the time to really share as much as we can with yourselves in terms of what is in the works within government to really ensure that we have appropriate frameworks going forward to really ensure we have a performing portfolio and we remove the fragmentation that's currently present. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG. I don't know whether the DM would like to add. If not, I'll give to the members. If DM is still in the meeting, because we got an apology that he will leave the meeting. DM? Seems he's not in the meeting. Okay, thank you very much, DM. I mean, DG. Let me give to honorable members. Honorable members, here is the presentation. I will give to you to ask questions. I'll see by your hand. This is very important presentation. I'm not going to allow anybody to leave this meeting without saying anything. I'll start with Honorable DeBrain, Honorable Nana, Honorable Bibi, and then lastly, I'll come with to Honorable Ngwenya. Honorable Honorable Debrain. Free State always they have a problem of network. I don't know on DG. What's the problem there? Honorable Nana.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And firstly, may I make a comment about this detailed presentation by the acting DG. In my years as a member of parliament, this is probably one of the most detailed presentations I had to sit through. It's been quite intriguing to listen to it. There is quite a bit that is contained in it. And if you look at the presentation at face value, you would have no other reason but to think that this is actually a good presentation. The plans look good. But honorable members, as we all know, that we've had one plan after the other, and most of them are collecting dust in one shelf or the other. So really, to have a good plan is one thing, but to implement it is something else. As they say, that the devil is in the detail. Chairperson, with regards to the Presidential State-Owned Entity Council, I would really be interested to know who constitute this council and what criteria has been used to appoint the council. What skills do people that serve in this council possess or will possess? And the second issue that I would want to bring to the attention of the meeting and the department is that last week I listened to quite an explosive interview on TV. JJ Tabane was interviewing, if I'm not mistaken, JJ was interviewing Lucky Montana. Mr. Montana made explosive accusations, startling revelations that in fact SOEs are being used by this government as slush funds. Now I would want to check with the acting DG whether they have bothered to investigate, or are they intending to investigate the veracity of these accusations, which are quite serious in my opinion. And thirdly, a week or two ago, we had a presentation from DENEL. DENEL told us that they were exiting some of the some of the non-core business activities. And I would want to check to what extent has DENEL's decision have got to do with the provincial SOE council, with the presidential SOE council, and has the shareholder, in this case, the department, given the go-ahead to DENEL's turnaround strategy. Number 4, Chairperson, I must mention this. In the presentation, we are told that the long-term strategy of centralizing the operations of SOEs is to have them under the presidency, is to have them reporting to the presidency. It should be worrisome, Chairperson, to all of us, because a few weeks ago, when the president was reshuffling his cabinet, we saw intelligence moved to the presidency. Some of us thought, wow, the presidency is becoming a super presidency. Of course, this was denied, and everybody else who raised the issue were referred to as alarmists. We now see once again the presidency is intending to have the operations of SOEs under its wings. Isn't this further creating a super presidency in our country, which is pretty much diagonally opposed to what the founding fathers of our democracy envisaged? The asset management state-owned company, I would want to know who will run this entity. Have you started the recruitment process? Who will be running the entity? I do understand the state will be 100% owner of the entity. I'm interested on who is going to run this entity, Chairperson, because, you know, more often than not, we have these brilliant plans, and when it comes to the implementation, we shoot ourselves in the foot. What criteria will be used to recruit executives that will be running this entity, the asset management state-owned company? Will affirmative action and cadre deployment be a criteria? Because if it is, I can tell you now, DG, this thing is doomed to fail once again, because we would have excluded capable South Africans who are prepared and skilled to contribute towards growth and development of our country. In your presentation, you say some of us still do ask the question, why is the state still in the business of doing business? And I'm one of those people who has been vocal in this regard. But you further go on to say, we need to create a credible state. People must have confidence in the state. But you know as much as I do that at this stage, the state is not credible. Our own fund managers across the length and breadth of our country are sitting on top of billions of rands. They're refusing to reinvest those monies back into our economy, for one simple reason, that the state has lost credibility. They don't have faith and confidence that if they reinvest those billions back in the economy, they will get a return for their investment. So how do you hope to juggle and balance this? You have a state that has lost credibility, and yet you want to somehow recreate that credibility by centralizing this very important aspect of our economy in the presidents. How do you think the markets are going to react to this? How do you think fund managers will react to this? And lastly, because my colleagues, I'm sure, have prepared for this as well. And lastly, Chairperson, I like the comparative analysis you've made with other countries insofar as centralization or decentralization of state-owned enterprises. But we should always try and compare apples with apples. Me and you know, we and France are not comparable. But I was happy when you mentioned Argentina and Kenya, because by so doing, you will be comparing apples and apples. But again, you stopped short of telling this meeting that in countries where the model has been successful, Finland, France, you name them, the criteria to appoint executives who run those state-owned companies is not what color is your membership card, or whether you are brown, yellow, pink, purple, or blue. If you are a French citizen, you possess the requisite skills, you are given the job. If you are a Finnish citizen, you have the requisite skills, you are given the job. And in some instances, if you are a European, you are from EU, European Union countries, we are given the job. So I thought it's important to raise that at DG, that this model has been successful in most countries, as you said. But the basis of who gets to lead them is key. Because for as long as we continue employing people on the basis of whether they are members of this political party or not, of whether they were in exile or not, of whether they are black, brown, red and pink, or blue, these plans are set to fail. I just wanted to add that as I conclude, Chairperson. Thank you very much. And my apologies for being a bit too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nana. Honorable Bibi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Greetings to the DG. Sorry. Greetings to the DG and the team, and also honorable members. Honorable Chair, I've only got 2 questions, of which the first one will be, DG, the real challenge that has been facing our SOEs is capitalization equity or funding, and it's a matter that has never been properly addressed when talking about state-owned companies. Now, what I want to know going forward is whether a funding model for sustaining remaining SOEs has been developed, and whether it includes private-public partnership, as the case with South Africa Airways, or they'll only be funded by government money. My second one, Chairperson, will be with regards to the appointment of board members. I think we cannot run away from the fact that their role in running SOCs is of major importance. At the same time, we cannot allow a situation where a board member sits on 21 boards. However skilled the person may be, and still hope that he or she will do justice in her fiduciary duties if he or she is appointed to sit as a board member in any of our SOEs. In other words, Chairperson, shouldn't it be a criteria that a board member of an SOE cannot sit in more than 10 boards? That is for an example, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. Those are my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mama. Let me check Honorable De Bruin again. Honorable De Bruin. You still have a problem of network? Honorable De Bruin. Okay. Honorable Mama Mangwe.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, wait, I want them to close the door, Chair. Thanks, Chairperson. The challenge that we have with this visual meeting when we are at home, you are effective in the life of the children. Because makona wena sofuneka kuvala umnyango uvala amagate abantu bangalokhu bangena babanga umsindo. Sorry for that, Chair. Ake bathi ngomanye ima radio mo. Thanks, Chairperson. For giving me this opportunity, Chair. Chair, I've got questions, not a question. Honorable Chair, I would like to thank the presentation. Chairperson, laptop yaka isinyegile ba ilo lukisa. I'm working with something fela mo eksa khone lo bereka le ka yona ke mohlolo fela. Boss. Hey. Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah, I'm sure go out.
Go out, Mama.
Thanks, and I apologize, Chair, for thanks very much to the department for the presentation. Honorable Chairperson, having listening to the presentation, I would like to ask the following question. The National Development Plan also expressed concern about state-owned companies for achieving their development goals and pointed the finger to credibility challenges in board appointment. Chair, can I switch on my video, please?
Mama.
Can I switch off my video?
Please, Mama.
Okay. I would like to repeat my question, Chair, on question number 1. The National Development Plan also expressed concern about the state-owned companies for not achieving their development goals and point the finger to credibility challenges in board appointment and instability. Will the department develop a framework for the appointment of boards in a form of producing a handbook? That's my first question, Chair. The second question, Chair, the findings of the report of the Presidential Review Committee found that legislative framework for state-owned companies is inadequate. Why has it taken very long to review the legislation governing the state-owned companies? The third question, Chairperson, as part of addressing measure of improving oversight over the state-owned companies, has the department conducted international benchmarking exercise against global threat and lesson for purpose, strengthening the capacity of the state-owned companies? If yes, which country did the department draw lesson from, and what is the nature of the lesson learned? The last question, Chair, after the reform process of the state-owned companies has been finalized, how often will their mandate be subjected to a review? Thank you, Chairperson. I will have the follow-up question after the response. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngwenya. Let me, before I give back to DG, to check, your apology, Honorable DeBrain, is noted, but I just want to check with you, do we have any question? Honorable DeBrain, do we have any question? Okay. DG, I think the main problem in our SOE, which I think we need to be addressed, is the question of borrowing powers as stipulated in PFMA. In some of our SOE, which in my view was the result of collapse of our SOEs, such as SA and the high debt at ESCOM. My question, DG, is with the new legislation in pipeline, how do you address this issue of borrowing power to make sure that this thing, it doesn't collapse our SOEs as we see in our country? That is happening. I'll give back to you, Honorable DeBrain. He doesn't have any question. Back to you, DG, to answer the questions that were asked by Honorable Member.
Chairperson, thank you so much. And thank you for the questions from the members. I'm going to also request some colleagues who are on the line to speak to some of the questions. But where I would like to start is just to just correct maybe a misunderstanding that could have come up with the presentation, because Member Nana spoke about this entity being placed in the presidency. I'm not sure how that was arrived at. But we have a presidential SOE council, which is chaired by the president. But what we have said is that we are looking at a form that a centralized function will take. And whether that will be, we said, whether it's an agency or whether it is a government department or whether it is a holding company, that's one of the decisions that needs to be made. And what we have seen in other jurisdictions is that this function, for instance, gets placed either in the ministry of, like our National Treasury, Ministry of Finance, or it gets placed into the Ministry of Trade and Industry. That's what we have seen. It's only in very instances do you see that being placed directly into the presidency, and that's and in no way did we say anything along the lines that is a preferred way going forward. And the SOE Council, in terms of what will be its future role, that will take shape and form. But at the moment, it's an advisory body. In terms of it provides advice and guidance to both the shareholder ministers, as well as to the, of course, to the president himself in terms of what is the best way of managing these entities where kind of interventions could be put in place. And that's and that still has to be implemented through the normal processes. If it is something that's within the ambit of the minister concerned, they will deal with that. If it's something that requires cabinet, obviously, that gets addressed through cabinet. Yeah, so that's, I just thought upfront, it's important to just speak to that a particular point. And what we are also saying is that with regard to the SOEs that would be best positioned within this, it's your commercial SOEs, and we have Schedule 2 entities. There's about 21, and I think if you count in some of the entities that are in the CF, I think the number goes up to about 26. That is out of a portfolio of about 750 odd SOEs that, and in this case, entities of government that I was referring to. So we're not talking about really the whole portfolio, though the point that we'd also like to make as well is that with regard to the rest of the non-commercial SOEs, there's a lot of consolidation that needs to be done there. For instance, if some of them have quite similar roles, for instance, should it not be pulled together into one entity, therefore help with regard to the running costs of those entities. And of course, those entities will, if they are at a central level, they will continue to be the responsibility of their respective ministries. And if they are at both provincial and local level, because we do have SOEs at that level, they'll continue to report to those structures. The Pseg membership is composed of ministers and the industry leadership, and some of the top business people are on there. The information has been shared quite widely. I think there was also a press statement to that effect. But I'll ask Osila maybe to just call out some of the names that we have. We also have representation of labor on the council as well. So we have ensured that we have as wide representation as possible. With regard to the comments that are attributed to Mr. Montana, we cannot say much on those. I think if he has evidence of what he's talking about, there are structures that have been put in place, including the Zondo Commission, which he had an opportunity to appear at, so he can bring that out to the law enforcement authorities. I think we cannot say much on our side without any evidence. If Mr. Nana has any of that, please, we'd like to know, to have that information and see how we can address that. But I can assure you that so far we have not come across any information that would support this kind of allegation in our oversight of our entities. The new business model for DENEL was approved by the minister. DENEL also had an opportunity to present to the PSEC. We have a consultation working group that got to hear their plans as well. And this, the right sizing of the portfolio obviously has been driven by the need to ensure that we have an affordable cost base for DENEL going forward in line with these revenues. And that review of the portfolio, I think, was at the right point to ensure that where there's some funding could be released through disposal of the assets that is taken advantage of, so that we can lessen the burden on the support from National Treasury. Chair, the point that Mr. Nada made on implementation, I think it's a fair point. It's been made on many other occasions by many other parties that we tend to be quite good in terms of developing the plans and implementation. It tends to not be as good as the plans that we develop. I think through the structures that have been put in place, including the PSEC and its very capable membership, we'll be able to address that particular point. And I think some of the some of the wins that have been achieved in repositioning the SOEs, I think, is showing that we are harnessing the capability that is available within government and from those that have availed themselves, to ensure that we show progress in ultimately getting to an optimal SOE portfolio management oversight function. The issue of confidence in the state is a point that I think through various interventions by government, including the setting up of the commission, is being addressed. I think the role that the SIU as well has played in terms of pursuing those that have misappropriate government and public and SOE funds, I think it's a commendable one, and it's helping really to show that impunity will not inform management of our SOEs going forward, and that should go a long way in terms of building up the confidence required. Of course, that will further be shored up by ensuring that we bring in the capable people with into the system, and the content that we have shared today showing that we have a risk and integrity management framework in place, which is being rolled out, which informs appointment of members of our boards when they are compelled to declare their interests on a regular basis, which are reviewed at the AGMs as well, is showing that we are working very hard in ensuring that there is trust in the SOE custodianship by government. The NLBB asked about the funding. We have put out on the table, including the need to bring in a private sector into the fold to assist us in undertaking some of the projects that are critical to our own economic development. And as to the form and shape that will take, I think will become clearer as we go forward. For instance, we have put on agenda on the table also the sovereign wealth fund option, which obviously can also go a long way in terms of ensuring that we have a proper funding of our SOEs. But what is important as well going forward is we need to break away from funding operational shortfalls. SOEs, when they bid for funding, should be towards creating new cash flows, whether it is building infrastructure, whether it's building or setting up new businesses in line with the new technologies that are coming to the fore now. That's what is needed. So the funding must create employment, it must stimulate the economy. We cannot keep filling holes which are a result of mismanagement at our SOEs. Honorable Ngwenya pointed out the issue of performance of our SOEs and correctly pointed out that the quality of leadership and instability have not helped in this regard. There's an area that that is receiving attention. We do have a framework in place, and now when your proposal on handbooks, we have seen that as well with other oversight authorities in other countries, that they produce these handbooks also so the public can know when it comes to remuneration management, how is that done? How when it comes to appointment of boards and executive, how is that done? And also in other areas, including, for instance, funding, could have one on funding, and so there are many other areas where such handbooks could be compiled, so that we also increase transparency in terms of how our SOEs are managed, and we very much welcome to that positive comment from yourself. The question on why has it taken so long from the PRC work to the PSEC? I think it's rather unfortunate that this was not we didn't run with it quite early on. I think maybe the challenges that we have experienced recently could have been avoided. Some of the recommendations from the PRC could have been implemented. But I guess in a way we are on to the work now, and what we can say with the new administration, the new minister in 2018, there's been a lot of work that has been done, taking leaf out of some of those recommendations. For instance, ensuring that we have capable men and women sitting on our boards and on our executive committees, with the necessary levels of skills that received quite a bit of attention. And it was not an easy task, because the reputation of our SOEs has unfortunately meant that to attract good people has proven to be quite a challenge. But we are hoping as time goes on, the confidence levels out there go up, and people again feel much more confident being associated with our SOEs. And of course, we appreciate some of the credible and capable leaders that have also put themselves forward and said, look, this is, I need to do this. This is the SOEs of my country. These are important to the development of our people, the development to the provision of proper services. So I must be part of this. We really appreciate that. But going forward, hopefully more will avail themselves. With the presentation, Honorable Ngwenya, we spoke to some of the examples of international counterparts. We have through this virtual channels that we have, we do engage with the likes of. I spoke to SASAC. I've spoken to Singapore, Malaysia, as well, and also I may want to also just speak on this, especially the work that we are doing as being part of the OECD. And the review of mandates, currently on an annual basis, we produce a strategic intent statement, which really indicates the government priorities that we expect the SOEs to undertake. It has a medium to long-term view on the SOEs, so we shall review it on an annual basis. But the SOEs are aware what is required of them. Of course, this must also be translated through the boards into the review of the business model to ensure that alignment. And I think in the past we have not done well enough in this regard in ensuring that the business model keeps up with developments in the within the marketplace. But that's where now the role of the board comes to the fore. If you have a capable board that has a good understanding of the sector in which they are operating, they are able to assess and intervene fairly quickly and say, shareholder, we need to change tack. The way how we have set up the business is no longer relevant, is now obsolete because things have changed. So this is how we propose we do things going forward. So that's the kind of interaction with the SOEs and their boards that we're expecting going forward. Honorable Chair, on the issue of prudent access to borrowing, that's such that we do not create new problems for SOEs, as we have seen some of our SOEs are carrying quite a massive burden in terms of interest on their debt holdings, and some of them are not generating adequate cash flows to be able to service that. That's an area that definitely will be receiving attention going forward, including ensuring that you have proper capital structures in place at our SOEs. And I'm going to ask TDG Mudisani to just speak to that point as well. Chair, if you permit me, can I ask Ms. Rathnam as well as Ms. Mudisani to come in and speak to the points that I asked them to contribute? Thank you.
Thank you, DG.
Thank you, Chair. This is Osila Ratnam. And honorable members, good afternoon, good day. Just to touch on the question around who are the PSEC members, I can list them, but it's a multi-dimensional, multi-tiered structure that the PSEC is made up of. And within the PSEC itself, there are different work streams. So in the work stream that relates to governance, we have Christine Ramon, Nazmira Mola, and Michael Sachs. In the work stream that relates to finance, we have Dawn Marole, Monsla Shlasla, Sipo Nkosi, Steve Harris. In the third work stream on consolidation and crisis management, in terms of those SOCs that need to be stabilized as we are doing our work, we have Fusi Kanyile, Ian Kirk, Joel Nishitenze, Judy Nokwedi, and Tony Ehrenreich. So you will find that the skills component is varied, and we do have labor representatives as well. What we also have is all the ministers that have shareholder oversight responsibilities over entities that are mainly commercial are also part of the PSEC. And within the department itself, you have sectors within the department. It's a matrix organization. So you have legal, you have financial, and you have experts that are looking at socioeconomic issues, etc. On the question of benchmarking, we've also looked at, we try to keep our finger on the pulse in terms of looking at even the SADC region. We've looked at Namibia already. Namibia has an SOE bowl. They then moved on to look at all our tools and frameworks that we have in place, and they have developed an ownership manual, but now they are constantly reviewing. So even in all the other countries that we benchmark, the review of the SOE oversight is a continuous process. We've looked at Botswana, for example. They went from about 100 SOEs that were mixed in terms of commercial agencies, regulators, and FDIs. So they had to segregate all of those and come down to exactly what those SOCs that are commercial that will fulfill their mandate. Through the African Union, we have a relationship with the African peer review mechanism, and we keep our pulse, our finger on the pulse there in terms of what in Africa is changing, what are the reviews around state-owned entities, because you're looking at a developmental state, and you can't, you wouldn't want to take a developed country and then just plug it into South Africa. You've got to find a fit. I'll stop there. Thank you, DG.
All right, thank you. Member Tisan, please come in.
Thank you very much, DG. Just in terms of the debt levels, for any entity, it is not always prudent to have unsustainable debt levels for any entity. So therefore, it would be very important to go back to the basics to make sure that you've got a optimal mix of debt and equity in terms of the entity. So that you don't find entities being having unsustained debt levels, because it really is not sustainable for an entity going forward. So in terms of that, as a response to that, we're actually looking at different options of actually making sure that over and above the optimal debt equity level, we also look at innovative ways of actually bringing in equity into the entities. Thank you.
Are you done, DG?
We are done, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, do we have any follow-up question? Do we have any follow-up question, honorable members?
Yes, Chair. Gwenya.
Okay.
Thanks,
Honorable, wait, Mama. Ma'am Bibi, do we have any follow-up? No. Honorable Nana, do we have any follow-up?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Honorable DeBrain, did you manage to connect and have any follow-up question? Okay. Honorable Nana, you can continue, and Ma'am Gwenya, you will follow.
Thanks, Chairperson. First, Chairperson, I want to place it on record that the issue I raised about Lucky Montana has nothing to do with Mlindi Nana. So I don't understand why in the DG's response, he then pulls me in to say, if I've got information, I must bring it forward. If I had information, I would have gone to the Zondo Commission. So my name should not even arise. I was asking a question as a member of parliament about an interview I had on TV, which millions of other South Africans also watched. And my question really was, what is the department doing about those startling allegations made by Lucky Montana? The DG has given a response. Now, in the DG's response about the long-term strategy, that it is in the sage that long-term strategy, the company will report directly to the president. The DG seems not to recall that, but I would like to take the meeting to slide 3. Hang on. Slide. I'll tell you now. Slide 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slide 6 of the presentation. If you can have that shared, Chairperson. Slide 6 of the presentation.
Honorable Nana,
Chairperson.
are you done?
No, I'm not done. I've asked whoever has got the presentation to share slide 6 with everybody because I want to refer to that slide.
Or the slide 6, DG? Is it anybody in your department has the presentation to share on the screen? DG is busy sharing it, Honorable Nana.
Thanks, Chair.
Slide number 6, ne?
Yes, that's it. That's the one. So, honorable members, if you go to slide number 6 as shared in front of us all, under profile, you will see it says, you will see the last sentence under profile, asset management state-owned entity is 100% owned by the South African government and through the Department of Public Enterprises or the Presidency. Long-term strategy is to have the SOE reporting directly to the Presidency. I would want a comment from the DG in this regard. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nana. Honorable Ngwenya.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you for the department for the response. I've got 4 follow-up questions, Chair. One of the most common challenges identified with the strategy is implementation. How are you going to ensure that this strategy are well implemented and yield the results that are desired? The second question, on what are you going to do if or where when these strategies are ignored or failed? The third question, Chair, can we have the timeline in terms of when the company will be established? Last question, can we also be assured that there will be a full proof of water right process that will ensure that there is no fraud that will be committed? If that is done, it will be easy to track or identify fraud-led activities. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngwenya, DG. DG?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you. Let me just want to share another slide. I'm going to ask the colleagues to just help me with, Mem Descent, if you can help me with Mengwenya's question in the meantime, please.
In terms of implementation, I think in terms of actually wanting to operationalize what we've actually envisaged is that there should be a very clear criteria of actually getting people who have a credible and a track record in terms of actually managing these assets. So that's how one would want to have. And this would actually be assisted by having a clear outline plan, so that when anyone puts their hand up, then they know exactly what it is that they want to get involved in. So when we conceptualize this, it's actually based on best practice, and it has actually been benchmarked across different jurisdictions, and also based on best practice right across. So in terms of that, it will be, as we've indicated, that we will be looking at people not only within our own space, but we're also looking from the people outside of government, be it private sector, who have a proven track record of actually manage these entities, so that implementation does see the light of day.
Well, thank you, sorry, Chair, for this. I'm just trying to just. Am I audible, Chair? If I'm asking?
Yes, you are.
Oh, great. Chair, what I had done is I was just showing the slide, this slide here, to address the question that was being asked by Honorable Nana, that the ultimate responsibility for the SOE portfolio, as it is with various components of government, would lie in the Presidential SOE Council, as we see it, as chaired by the President. But what you have is, you'll have an authority which has direct oversight of the various complexes as represented here. And this structure here is very much in line with what we have seen in many other parts of the world, that you'd have this kind of entity having direct responsibility for these. And as I said, what we have seen in other parts of the world as well is National Treasury and the Ministry of Industry, for instance, Trade and Industry, would be the ones that are normally given the responsibility to look after these. So, and that's really what that's it. Maybe we could have worded that line a lot better, so that it doesn't create the confusion it has created. But there's absolutely no intention to have the SOEs reporting to the ministry as to what was spelled out in the example that was cited by Honorable Nana. We hope that this corrects any misconception that could have been created. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG. Members, are you satisfied with your answer? With the answers that the DG and the department responded? If you are not satisfied, we'll ask you to put in writing and send to the department so that they can respond in writing. I think, let me take this opportunity, Honorable DG, to thank you and the DM, who was part of the meeting today. But let me also stress the point of implementation. Yes, in your presentation, you've got a good ideas. Please make sure that you implement. We must talk about the implementation now. We don't have time because a lot of the department, they do have a good initiative, but they don't implement. And then the other issue that I wanted to stress on it again, in our language, it's an issue of the board members. all board members, yes, they do have skills. But when we look at our SOEs, they put our SOEs in tatters. Why? Because they do have skills. Why they don't do an oversight over the officials there? Or maybe they have skills, but they don't have the interest of our communities. Because if you don't have the interest, you can do whatever you wanted to do. You can leave things even when your SOE that you are board member on it to fall in the brink of a collapse. You don't care. You don't have any interest with anybody. But as the public representative, we do have the interest of our own community DG. Make sure that, please, when you appoint those board members, there must be a credible people that will make sure that our entity doesn't collapse. Now, this is a high time. Look at our SAA. Look at our ESCOM. I can mention a lot of our entities that are in tatters today, but we do have board members that have skills. And other members raise an issue of board members that are in so many boards. Maybe that's the problem, that they are making them to relax, because you have that board. Today you are running to another board, you don't concentrate on one or two boards. So make sure that somebody must not put his hand or her hand must not be full, so that they can make sure that they do oversight over the officials. With these few words, DG, I'm not commanding Mkholole, but just to say, as a public rep, this is a serious concern. With these few words, I would like to thank you with your department, to say thank you very much. If you can implement this good initiative, we'll be happy. You are officially released, and please make sure that in this period you take care of yourself, members of the department. You take care of your beloved ones. We still have COVID, and encourage our community members to come and vaccinate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This, you are released. Honorable members can remain, so that we can deal with our internal issues. Bye-bye. Amanda, are we correcting to deal with our internal matters? Or any matters that—
Yes, Chair, we are.
We are, okay. Okay, we noted the apologies for Honorable Mamukause, Honorable Arnold. Honorable members, next item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Did you receive the minutes on time, honorable member?
Yes, we did, Chairperson. We got them on time. I move for the adoption of the minutes.
Anyone who wanted to second that, those honorable baby? I'm going. Any seconder?
I second, Chair. I'm back. Thank you very much.
Oh, you are back, Honorable Chair. Yanu ke tsoking kile mata ha hohle. Ow, I didn't know that you are back. I could give you to
No,
close the
man.
meeting.
No. It's your meeting. You must close it.
How stupid I am.
Sorry, Chair, that has disturbed me. I was want to say I support the minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any item that we still have we left with? None.
No, Chair,
Amanda,
we are done.
We are done with our meeting. Okay. Let me take this opportunity again once more to thank you very much, honorable members, for being here to our meeting. This presentation, it was very important, honorable chair of the committee. It was very, very, very important. Really, we need to take it home and read it, and to make sure that when we do oversight over these entities and the department, we have checked what did they promise us to do, that they will do. So it was very important, and it was very key presentation. With this, those few words, honorable members, I would like to thank you to say, Honorable Chair, I think this is our last meeting today, if I'm not mistaken. Is it our last meeting, Chair? Honorable Matibe, is it our last meeting?
Yeah, I think that will be our last meeting, unless guided by the parliamentary meeting on at 1 o'clock of chairs. That will be our last meeting until for the third term until November. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson Matibe, and honorable members. It's our last meeting. Let's go home and let's go to our constituency and make sure that our own organization that we that they elected us to be here, we are going to service them. But when we service them, let's make sure that we take care of ourselves. We take care of ourselves. With the powers that vested to me, I just want to say, we don't want to hear anything when we come back on November to say one of our members is no more or is critically ill because he was in the mood of election. He or she didn't want to take care of herself. But also, even our family members, they must take care of ourselves. Let's go back, and next week on the 18 and 19, make sure that our kids that are turning 18 years, they must go and register. And other members that they didn't register, they must go and register and to vote. And when we go to our constituency, let's sing one song. Whether you are blue, like I heard Honorable Nana talking about a blue, green, or yellow, or any color. Let's sing one song to say, people come and vaccinate. Vaccination doesn't kill anybody. It is assisting us, though it is not preventing COVID, or it is not curing COVID, but it is making sure that our system or resist on this pandemic. So let's call upon all our community members to come and vaccinate. Let's call all community members to go and register, and the date of the election, they must go and vote. They must not register and not sit at home. They must go and vote. They'll choose which political party they need to vote for, which political party that they see it is giving them a good services. So with these few words, honorable members, thank you very much. Go well. See you when you come back. This meeting is officially adjourned, and also you and officials, take care of yourselves. Thank you very much.
Bye. Marian Di Palo.
Rien di palo.